Now, the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has slammed Europe for what he describes as increasingly restrictive refugee policies. Ban said such policies negatively affect the obligation of European countries under international humanitarian law and European law. He also said that he's alarmed by the growing xenophobia in Austria and other European states. The UN chief was addressing Austrian lawmakers in Vienna. On Wednesday, the Austrian parliament adopted a law that allows the government to declare a state of emergency if refugee numbers suddenly rise. The law also allows a rejection of most asylum seekers at the border. It's one of Europe's toughest asylum laws, as the continent is facing its biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Joining us now is Wahid Azal. He's an independent scholar and political commentator, and he joins us via Skype from Berlin. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Mr. Azal. Now, what do you make of Ban Ki-moon's comments? Do you agree that Europe is adopting restrictive policies which may just go against international law?
Well, absolutely. There's no question about it that these laws are contravening international law on refugees and asylum seekers. They're also in contravention of the EU's own humanitarian laws. But with Austria specifically, what we need to remember that there was an election this last Sunday that put the far-right candidate of the Austrian Freedom Party, Norbert Hofer, in the first round. And this is unprecedented. This is like it's created a political tidal wave. Basically in this part of Europe, that is pretty much on the verge of bringing a racist far-right candidate to power in Austria that is supported by a right-wing legislature that will positively push more of these draconian laws in the Austrian parliament.
So we are, as you've just mentioned, seeing this sort of a wave of these far-right political parties rising to power. Is it a direct result of these refugees?
Well, when we ask this question, we also have to ask the question, why wasn't this the case in the 1990s, where you had massive influx of ex-Yugoslavians from Bosnia, Serbia, etc., coming to Western Europe when that war is going on? Why are Syrians, Middle Eastern, people from Muslim countries being singled out for this sort of xenophobia and racism? And, the answer is that Europe has not really completely buried its ghosts of 70 years ago.
So you're basically saying that the Islamophobic sentiments that we're seeing on the rise in a lot of European countries is something that was inherently part of the society even from before this refugee crisis?
Well, it was inherently part of the society, but buried. They up until probably recently, maybe the last 10 years, European governments and societies generally adhere to these international humanitarian laws. But with the dying of social democracy in Europe, and also certain actors from behind the scenes, foreign powers, that are actively cultivating fascism and racism on the continent, has brought all of this up again.
So if the refugees leave, though, will these sentiments of xenophobia and Islamophobia disappear too?
Probably not. No, they won't. Because these are symptoms of larger problems that are being smokescreened by the political establishment. They don't want the population to know that they're mismanaging economies, or that their politicians are hiding large funds of money in offshore accounts like the Panama Papers are now revealing to us. So, they cultivate these sorts of issues to divert attention from the general uninformed public as to what is really going on. And these people react in the typical and well-known patterns that we've seen in the past.
And before I let you go, Mr. Azal, there's obviously that ideology that says that if Europe really wants to tackle this refugee issue, then it should put more urgency into solving the crisis in Syria. Why are we not seeing that?
That is the crux of the matter, because there is no interest, real interest, by the Central Powers here, which are being puppeteered by the United States and obviously in Israel and their allies, to solve this problem, to end the war, to bring everything to a conclusion, because they're after regime change in Syria, and until they get that, they don't want to see an end to the war. It's really as simple as that.
All right, let's leave it there for now. That's Wahid Azal. He's an independent scholar and political commentator joining us via Skype from Berlin. Mr. Azal, thank you very much indeed for your comments here on Press TV.